Now, I believe that Republicans in general are far more courtly than Democrats. I think I've told you I've interviewed Dick Cheney, I interviewed Donald Rumsfeld. And I asked them both, what's your biggest regret? I interviewed them separately, so they didn't coordinate this. And they both said the same thing. When people began saying Bush lied, people died, we didn't respond forcefully because we didn't think people would believe it. That's Republicans. We're not going to fire back. We're not going to hammer back. We're not going to go after them for making such an outrageous charge. They pretty much ignored it because they felt that sane, rational people would not believe that I, as Commander-in-Chief, and I, as VP to the Commander-in-Chief, would send men and women in combat in harm's way, some of whom are going to die, some of whom are going to be injured, some seriously for life. They did not believe that rational Americans would believe that they would do it just because. Fill in the blank. Just because George W. Bush wanted to be a wartime president, just because George W. Bush wanted to complete the job his father started, just because George W. Bush thought he looked great in camouflages. What the hell other reason? Just as the gentleman called earlier and said, what would be Donald Trump's motive? And I've talked about this before. Here's what I'm going to do. I lost the election, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send a bunch of people to the Capitol building, trash the building, scare the bejesus out of Nancy Pelosi. Then they'll realize that America and the world will be far better off if they give me 4 more years. That's what I'm going to do. That's the ticket. That's the plan. Really? And so Cheney and Rumsfeld said to me that they did not believe that the American people would believe it. I mean, say what you want about the war, say what you want about the failure to find the stockpiles, all that stuff, but that we sat around and decided to ignore intelligence that suggested there was no stockpiles of WMD, to fabricate a case for war just because? No one's going to believe that. Surprise, surprise. At least half the country still believes it. When you are bombarded on CNN, MSNBC, hee-haw, by the likes of these hosts who leave out things, who don't correct people. Kamala Harris gave an interview to Axios. The host, the reporter was Mike Allen, if he's a reporter. And she says the Trump administration left us no plan for coronavirus vaccine distribution. Even Dr. Fauci said it wasn't true. Did Mike Allen say anything when she said it? Didn't say a squat. And I've said after Tapper said, you know, I've gone back and I looked at this. And it turns out that Donald Trump was not talking about Nazis, was not talking about white nationalists when he said there are good people on both sides. He was talking about the issue of whether or not there ought to be a Confederate monument in public square. Joe Biden goes on CNN after Tapper says this and repeats the lie, and nobody corrects him. Now, ask people who think Donald Trump is racist to give their number one example, and they will cite Charlottesville. And it's a lie. And guess went on CNN after McConnell, after Jake Tapper, said to their listeners, it isn't true, and people said it again. And the host didn't say, well, excuse me, my colleague Jake Tapper, whose office is down the halls, my colleague Michael McConnell, he comes over here on the weekends, that's true. But he's a credible guy, and he said, nobody said a word. Donald Trump says Mitch McConnell is a dour, sullen, unsmiling political hack, and the Republican senators are going to stay with him. They will not win again, end of quote. More from Trump on McConnell, and Matt Gaetz also on McConnell. I'm Larry Elder.